To bring the guests into the discussion here in the studio with me is Khalid El-Bey, a political cartoonist based in Doha. Joining us from Paris is Catherine Gilliardi, a French journalist and social commentator. And completing the panel in London is Douglas Murray, Associate Director at the Henry Jackson Society. Good to have you with us. If I could start with Khalid here in the studio. You're a cartoonist and a Muslim.
Yes.
Do the two mix?
They mix.
How?
There's a lot of us.
What do you paint cartoons of? Many outside the Muslim world are asking, can Muslims find a sense of humor?
We do. We of course we have to go through hoops to avoid censorship in so many levels. We go through censorship in so many levels. Social censorship because of the social religious factors in the region, and as well as government-imposed censorships that we also have to dodge every time, and of course self-censorship.
You support what Charlie Hebdo did? The characters.
I condemn what the attack that happened, and I condemn the extremists for this horrific attack. But at the same time, I'm not a fan of the publication. I never was. I thought it was quite racist, actually. And
why did you find it racist?
They're just feeding into the mainstream media prototypes of people, like profiles of ethnic groups, or they're not. It's not smart cartoons. Everybody can make a gag. Anybody can make a gag, but it's quite what the smart thing to do is how to deliver that without offending anybody, and at the same time, even if you're offending anybody, what is your message? It's not just a joke for the sake of a joke. Right.
Okay, let's bring in our London guest into the discussion at this point. Do you think this attack will underscore the message of the far right in Europe, at least, of the incompatibility of Islam and the West, or Western values?
That's a pretty atrocious question, if I may say so. We're about 24 hours away from 12 people being gunned down in a newspaper office in the centre of Paris, in a European city, because they offended, allegedly, Islamic blasphemy laws which France, Britain and other European countries do not have and do not believe in and do not follow. And for you to turn the question immediately, not on the people who've been massacred because of asserting their rights as European French citizens, but onto the alleged terrible discrimination of the French is really quite despicable.
So I didn't ask you anything about discrimination of the French. Let me repeat the question.
You went straight on to the alleged backlash.
Let me ask you the question again in case you didn't understand it. Do you think this attack, we are in our news bulletins talking in more detail about the actual attack. What you were invited to discuss in this show are the implications of what might follow the attack. Will it underscore the message of those who say there is an incompatibility between Western values and Muslim values?
No, you want to paint the narrative which you think turns immediately, not from the attackers, but
I
on
want
the French
an answer,
society,
sir, that's
which
all.
you would like to portray. I'm giving you my answer, so why don't you listen to it? Which you would like to portray as somehow anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic or anything like this. Let's start from the fact that 12 people were massacred because European citizens asserted their right, which they have every right to do, to draw Muhammad just as they have the right to draw any other historical figure, which they believe in or don't believe in, it doesn't matter. They have that right. I don't think at this stage whether, a discussion of the far right in France or anything like that is really the point. The point is people were killed and gunned down for doing their job as journalists and cartoonists in a free society.
OK, let's try with our guest joining us from France. Perhaps she would like to address the question. Do you think there is a message coming out of this, of the incompatibility of Muslim and Western values? It seems our guest in London doesn't want to tackle that. Perhaps you would.
I think that's what the killers would like us to believe. They're French. They were brought up in this country, and they made this choice to become what they've become. They've killed a policeman, for example, who was also from an Algerian background like them, French citizen as well. So I think this is not the issue, and this should never be the issue. This is the issue they want us to address, and they want to make that statement that there is an incompatibility between two worlds. I think they are extremists, and I think we should not let other extremists on the other side who believe that as well, like our extremists here from the right wing or extreme right wing, who believe that there is an incompatibility between an Islamic world and a Western world. I think we should never allow this question to be put.
Well, let's bring it back to the studio here. One thing which you mentioned to me just before we started was you're surprised at some of the reaction that has developed since this terrible attack that's happened on the offices of Charlie Hebdo. Tell us a little bit about how you see, what message you're taking away as a cartoonist, as a Muslim, about the compatibility of values or incompatibility.
I'm Sudanese. I speak Arabic, but I do most of my cartoons either in English or no comment, because I'm trying to bridge that gap. I'm trying to reach out to the people in the West because of this incompatibility and compatibility issue. I want to show them that we are the same. We're going through the same problems that you are. We are affected by extremists just like you are. We are as much scared, and we are the biggest victims of extremist attacks in the world. So because of mainstream media does not tackle these issues, and all they focus on is the differences. They don't focus on how we're all alike. We all grew up in the same world, and what we should know about each other, and what we should respect about each other's cultures and know about each other, so we can live along, like just make a middle line and walk together, basically, and instead of just pointing fingers. Mm-hmm. So this is what I think should happen, and this is what I think should we should all work towards.
All right, thank you very much, Douglas in London. No doubt there will be a lot of thought as to how policy should proceed going forward. What do you think the policy should be? What are the practical policy lessons learnt from this attack?
Well, there are no practical policy lessons learned. People are still mourning the dead and identifying bodies. The thing that is going to happen in the weeks and days ahead is that people are going to have a set of questions. The first will be obvious security questions, simply about how it was that two people were able to go into the office in Paris with Kalashnikovs and gun people down in cold blood. That will certainly be a part of it. There's a technical security discussion to be had. There's also a discussion about wider society and what its reaction should be and all that sort of thing. But really the most febrile and important discussion at the moment is the one that the Free Press is having across Europe, which is whether or not they will stand up and retain the right to do what we in Europe and free peoples have the right to do, which is to draw what we like. And the key message from this really can't be emphasized enough, because your guest in Doha is a cartoonist. He knows very well that he can't draw a cartoon of Mohammed there. Even if he wanted to, he wouldn't, because his life would be at great risk.
I wouldn't do that anyway, sir. No.
And one of the reasons, you wouldn't do it. Okay, sir, maybe it's not just because. Can I just finish my point?
Okay, finish your point, then we'll give Khalid a chance.
If you are a Muslim, you may decide not to do that. However, in countries like Britain and France, most of us are not Muslims, and we do not believe in Muhammad as the founder of any faith that we follow. People are Christians, atheists, all sorts of things. You cannot expect, and this is the crucial thing, Muslims should not expect non-Muslims to abide by their own belief systems. You can yourself decide, you as a Muslim do not want to depict Muhammad, but the idea that is coming along in Europe at the moment is a growing idea that people who are not Muslims, who do not believe in Muhammad, who do not follow Islam, are also to be have to obey the rules of Islamic blasphemy. And in Europe at the moment, that is the big debate.
You've made that point, Douglas. You wanted to go ahead, Khalid. You had a comeback on that. You were saying that you couldn't draw a cartoon on the Prophet Muhammad, even if
as I explained, I wouldn't draw a cartoon of Prophet Muhammad because of these issues, because this is how we grew up, because this is our culture. We do not do that. But in the argument about freedom of speech, I mean, yes, the West does have freedom of speech, and yes, you should fight to keep that freedom of speech. I accept that totally, and I believe in that, right? As a cartoonist and as a human being, and for me as a cartoonist who does not have that freedom to that extent, right? But at the same time, if you have all these rights, if you have all this power, why would you want to use it to upset a whole, population? Why would you want to do that?
Life is upsetting all the time.
We already live in a troubled world. We already live in a troubled world, sir.
Right. No one doubts that.
We already
let's get beyond that platitude for a second and get on to the substance of it. Let's get on to the substance of it.
Douglas, don't interrupt him now. We gave you a chance. Douglas, just give him a chance to finish.
Every single cartoonist in Britain and in Europe is able to, and many of them do, make jokes around Christmas time and so on about the Virgin Mary, three wise men and so on. We accept that as the right. What Charlie Hebdo was trying to do and what others have asserted the right to do is to treat Islam exactly as they treat every other religion.
Okay, you've made that point, and the shooting, of course, has been widely described as an attack on freedom of speech, as we're hearing from our panel here. France prides itself on the right of freedom of speech, but even that does have certain limits. The Gay Salt Act, for example, makes denial of the Holocaust a criminal offence. The Pleven Act prohibits incitement to hatred, discrimination or slander based on race or gender. 2003 law made it a crime to insult the French flag or national anthem, and the country's public health code makes it illegal to present a favourable view of drug use. Catherine, is there a place for a discussion about the inclusiveness of Europe, of how far Europe should go in being inclusive, or, as Douglas would present it, how far Europe shouldn't be asked to compromise its principles when it comes to accommodating the sentiments of Muslims?
Charlie Hebdo was sued for the caricatures of Mohammed in 2007. And the then editor of Charlie Hebdo, Philippe Val, said, we're not talking about belief, we're talking about ideologies. Is radical Islam, Islam used as an excuse for killing a belief or an ideology? If we are talking about ideology, there is a freedom of speech in this country, as in many others, and any ideology can be challenged, can be criticized in many ways. You can do it by fiction, you can do it by a report, you can do it investigation, you can do it with a cartoon. And this is what we're talking about. I think we should not mix up everything. You talked about the Holocaust. The Holocaust is a fact that historians worldwide have established as a fact, meaning they use scientific methods of academics, to prove that it has actually happened. Denying the Holocaust is an ideology. And this is not, should I believe it's happened or not? It has happened. It's a scientific fact. If you challenge that, then it's an ideology. And if it does prompt hatred, yes, hatred is challenged, not only challenged, but by law forbidden. And Charlie Hebdo was sued by Muslim associations in 2007 for those those Mohammed caricatures on this basis, on hatred prompted on religious grounds. And Charlie Hebdo, I didn't agree with all that happened. I mean, I'm not a fan of Charlie Hebdo, but they went to court and it was decided that, yes, on the grounds of ideology, they are allowed to challenge radical Islam. Not Islam, radical Islam. Charlie Hebdo is used to having trials. They have a budget for that, like every other satirical newspapers worldwide. And they have been sued 14 times by Catholic, extreme right Catholics, only once by Muslim associations. So, let's not mix up everything. Are we talking again about an ideology? And if yes, and I think we are here, men who kill because they don't agree with your ideas, they make a statement. It's not in the belief of Islam to do that. I don't think so. So in that sense, yes, every ideology should be challenged in a world where the freedom of speech of the press is respected.
Where do you draw the line between radical Islam and what is Islam? Is that something that Europe is still grappling with? What is considered legitimate
Between radical Islam?
debate
Okay.
about radical Islam, and what is considered hate speech against Muslims when you have thousands of rallies of thousands of people saying, you know, calling basically that there is no place for Muslims and Muslim values in Europe?
If I could pick,
Sorry,
I pick
Douglas,
you up on that?
No, can you let me finish actually my question? When you
Yeah,
have
but I'll
thousands of
come in
people
after that,
calling
if I may.
for
Shall I answer?
calls
Yeah.
which sound very similar to the minds of some for the calls for expulsions of Jews from Europe during the Second World War, where do you draw the line between what is legitimate debate and what is simply racism when it comes to Islam? Catherine.
Okay, maybe we have to work on our vocabulary. When I call it radical Islam, maybe I shouldn't say that. I should just say people who use Islam as an excuse to kill. And you're right, you have fundamentalist Islam, which doesn't mean you're a terrorist. Here we have terrorists, we have fascists even, in the sense that we have had here in Europe before the Second World War and during the war. Fascism is the fact of rejecting everyone that is not like me and that doesn't believe like I do believe. I think the Middle East for now is the first victim of this fascism with what is happening with Daesh. So this is what I mean, and maybe you're right, we should work on our vocabulary when we say radical Islam. What do we mean? This is what I mean, and this is what most commentators mean in this country, and what Charlie Hebdo was challenging, is challenging. It's the use of religion to impose your law on others.
Okay.
And not only your law, but you condemn the others to death because they don't follow your rules.
Okay,
This is where I draw the line, and it has nothing to do with a religious belief.
Wonderful. Khalid, here in the studio, it's been said and it's been asked, why would you want to impose your values on others? Why would you want to impose your understanding of what is legitimate comedy, what is legitimate discussion on others? Should a person in Europe be asked to abide by your cultural norms?
I think that, you know, as a cartoonist myself, I think you have responsibility. You have a responsibility to deliver a message, to ask the right questions in the right form of way. Mm-hmm. This is what we're trying to do. It's not that I'm imposing something on you. This is you know, I can draw Prophet Muhammad if I want to. You can't stop me. And it's not about that. It's really about, why are you drawing Prophet Muhammad in that way? I mean, it's fine. You can do it. But what are you getting out of it except for you know, pleasing yourself,
all right,
and upsetting 20 million people.
Point. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I want to bring in Douglas from London. We had a reasonable, I would say, definition there from Catherine Gileadi in France about what perhaps the fight is really against, the fascism of those who believe in exclusively fighting those who don't agree with their ideas. Would you agree with that definition, and would it apply?
You mean the fascism of radical Islam?
Well, I think Catherine would apply that. I don't want to speak for her.
Yeah.
I think she would apply that to all
I got
forms
that
of
right.
fascism.
Yes. Sure. Unfortunately, if an impartial viewer were watching your program, they'd come away with the idea that all Germans and French people are nascent fascists waiting to expel Muslims. Actually, you just painted, for a journalist, it's quite shocking. You just painted a completely inaccurate portrait of what is going on in protests in Germany, which, in actual fact, if you look at it, are highly specific. Can I finish my point?
Let me correct you on a factual
you
point.
said
I
that
didn't
the
say all
demonstrations
Germans or all
in Germany,
French are looking to expel
but then
Muslims,
you decided
and I
to
didn't
say
mention
that the
a
Germans
protest in
you
any
talked
particular
about,
country. So now that we got the facts straight, please go ahead.
Your incredibly biased portrayal of European citizens starts from your misportrayal of people turning out at protests as being against all Muslims or wanting to expel them. And the presenter in Doha, sit in Doha. It really is astonishing. You are painting a picture of Europe which is outrageous. Across the Middle East, cartoons are published every day, every week, with the most disgusting anti-Semitic propaganda, the most disgusting propaganda in them. And you sit in Doha, a not free society, and smear Germans and French people a mere 24 hours after this totalitarian,
I've just corrected you. You don't seem to be hearing me, so let me correct correct you
itself
again. Sorry,
in
sir.
Paris.
I did not say the words all Germans or all French are against or calling for the expulsion of Muslims. That never came out my mouth. I said there are protests in which there have been protests by some in Europe, a minority, who are calling for
and they're
exclusivity.
Against Salafists. Do you not follow any details? The German protests are against Salafists. There is a problem in Europe, sir, and the problem is of Islamic fundamentalism. There is now also a secondary problem, which is that many people who do not like the Islamic fundamentalists are objecting to it. I suggest we unite in sorting out the first primary problem in order to also prevent the secondary problem from ever growing.
Okay.
But we have to portray this accurately.
Exactly.
And you as a journalist should be doing that.
We are doing that, and I thank you for your participation in this show.
It doesn't sound like it, and it's all very well
perhaps you could
for Al Jazeera from Doha to do this, but really...
Well, perhaps you would be honest enough to answer the basic question I asked you at the beginning of this show. Do you believe... Can I finish the question? May I finish the question? Thank you. Do you believe that what has happened today is a fringe example of the behavior of a few Muslims, or do you in the far right believe that this is an example of why Muslims are incompatible with European culture? I'm not sure. If you're talking about honesty and answering the questions and factuality, please answer that.
Let's remember, of course, you work for an unfree media and an unfree state.
No, I don't. And you want to... I'm sorry. We're not going to have a discussion on my media and the media I work in, sir. You're avoiding answering the question. You don't want to answer the question, sir.
I'm a free man. I will answer it, and let me just finish speaking. I will answer it because I'm a free person and a free European in a free society. And I can tell you that the primary problem is people who walk into offices and gun people down. There will be people in Europe, and I hope that they do not grow in number, who will object to that in a particularly unpleasant way. I hope that we all unite in stopping the fascist Islamists who turn up to offices and disgrace the name of their religion and attack people because of their right to freedom of speech. And I think that's what we need to focus on.
And non-Islamists. This is who we should stop. We should not stop and focus and point fingers. We should stop all extremists.
No, you do all need to point fingers. Sir. You need to point fingers.
All extremists. We need to point fingers at all extremists.
Unfortunately, what we do need to do at this point is end the show, I'm afraid, because we are out of time. Let's thank our panel. We certainly had a lively input there. Thank you very much, Douglas Murray, Catherine Gileadi and Khaled.
You didn't frankly have the balls to put country before party.